Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion this evening, Today's Boys, Tomorrow's Men. My name is Kelly West, and I'm the Director of Admission here at Browning, and I am lucky to be joined by a handful of folks this evening, a combination of administrators, alumni, and students who are going to talk about Browning's mission and values. So thank you so much for being here with us this evening, and thank you for your consideration. Before we get started, I'll turn it over to Dr. Body, who would like to just say a quick hello.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being with us tonight. I'm John Body. I'm lucky enough to be head of school here at Browning, and Kelly's right. I need to keep this very quick. It's sort of a shop-worn cliche to say that what makes a place special are the people, but cliches become cliches for a reason, because there's a deep truth that inheres in a lot of them. And the folks you're going to meet tonight, our students, our alums, my colleagues, they they make me so proud to be a part of this community. And so thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. And I'm looking forward to learning and laughing and spending some time with you. And I hope you'll enjoy it as well. So I should probably actually throw it to one of my friends and colleagues, Mr. Gene Campbell, the head of our upper school, to get our panel started. Gene?
Yeah, thank you, John. Am I coming through okay? I've had some trouble. John and I co-teach a class, and he saw my internet troubles all too well this morning. I will share my thanks to everyone. I'm grateful to be able to be here, but I'm also grateful that you're interested in Browning and you're with us here tonight. I'm going to ask the folks with me here on the screen, my fellow panelists, to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with my colleagues. Ronald, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Gene. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to share space and hold space with everyone this evening. My name is Ronald Taylor. I'm currently the head of the middle school. As you can tell by my voice, I'm a middle schooler in some ways. Voice is going in and out. But it's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm excited to spend time with everyone, getting to speak more about this awesome place that we get to call school and work. I'll turn it over to Naledi to introduce himself.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Naledi Samela. I'm the Director of Equitable Practices and Social Impact in my first year at Browning. Pleasure to be with you all tonight. And just to reiterate what Mr. Campbell said, we appreciate your interest in our school. Back to you, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. We are lucky enough to be joined by 3 current Browning students. And I'm gonna start with Brody. I'll turn it over to you, Brody.
Hello, I'm Brody, and I'm in 7th grade.
All right, and Adam.
Hey everyone, my name is Adam. I'm in the 9th grade.
All right, and Greg, you're the closer here.
I'm Greg, and I'm a senior.
All right, and then we're also joined by 2 of our illustrious alumni, 2 gentlemen who I'm really proud to say have come back to the school in a really important way that we'll learn more about as we go on. But Dillon, I'll turn it to you, please.
Hey, my name is Dillon Smith. I'm from the class of 2011, and it's really great to talk to you folks and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. And Nate.
Hey, everybody. Nate Garcia, class of 2006. I'm a senior associate scientist over at Pfizer in vaccine research and development. And I joined the community today as a Panther mentor and most recently as a trustee as well.
Thank you. Ms. West, I think back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for the introductions, everybody. So let's dive right in. I know we have a lot to talk about tonight. And I figured a good place to start would be to talk a little bit about the title of this evening's discussion, Today's Boys, Tomorrow's Men. And I'm wondering if you all could share a little bit about what this means to us at Browning, what this means to you, you know, in terms of your role or your part in our community, and how we think about preparing our boys to be what we like to call the kind of people the world needs.
I'm happy to jump in and kick us off there. Thank you for the question, Ms. West. So in middle school, I like to always describe it as being messy, right? So we're walking through all the difficult parts of life. And the goal is that when you walk in, you're slightly messy. When you walk out, a little bit less messy. And so a part of that is really thinking about the idea of dignity, which is one of our core values here at Browning. And so oftentimes in my role as head of middle school, but then also working with just where our boys are, given that we are living through a pandemic, the main focus for me is thinking about, as we move through our middle school years, how do we not only identify our own dignity and our own purpose, another one of our core values, but also how do we uphold that in other people? And so that's done through different things, such as our modern masculinity suite of courses that I'm sure we'll touch on throughout the evening, which is really exciting. But then also what brings me joy is our assembly program. And so we have a series of dignity-based assemblies in the middle school where we engage those hard questions, like what does it mean when a moment of harm happens? And what does it mean to respond to it and uphold the dignity of ourselves and others? And so for me, that's the important work of not only loving on boys, but also helping to facilitate their transition from young boys to men. And that's how I think the middle school fits into both tonight, but also the arc of what Browning is as a school.
I'll pick it up from there if that's all right. As boys transition into upper school, we're still focused on that core value of dignity, of course, right? We hope to deepen the boys' understanding of one of our other core values of curiosity as well, right? So we talk about interpersonal curiosity. We talk about intellectual curiosity. We slowly turn the keys over to the boys as they grow to take more and more agency over their own learning. Sorry for the background noise here. And it's an important part of their learning, but just as humans and as men, and it's an important part of their academic growth. But we take that interpersonal curiosity really, really deeply as well, right? How do they support one another? How do they show up and be caring, compassionate men of intellect and integrity, right? That's exactly what we want them to be all the time, and that's what we try to enact constantly. I will say the other thing, not to belabor the obvious, but in that today's boys, tomorrow's men title, boys and men, we take our role as a boys' school really seriously. We are research backed in all of our practices, and we bring in constantly the best experts there are on how boys learn, how boys develop, and so it's something at the forefront of our minds all the time, and we will always be choosing those best practices for boys.
I'll dovetail on that, Gene. So what I really love about that title is the comma, right? It's not an arrow, it's not an ellipsis. We're focused on both really intentionally. And as Mr. Campbell was saying, research-backed, right? Best practices. We are focused on what our boys bring to the school today, right now. We're really intentional about helping them be their best selves now. And that includes intentional about making mistakes. That includes intentional about how learning happens through struggle, right? And through successes, through relationships with everybody in the building. And that intentionality allows us to see, and allows for the boys to see some of the other great folks we have with us tonight. And we have these alumni who reflect, right, the men that we want our boys to be eventually. They can look back, they come back to Browning and think about the boys they were when they were behind those red doors. And so we really are living in both worlds as a school, keeping folks connected to the community. And that's intentional too. And so that's what I really love about that. It's not just seeing potential in folks, it's seeing today while thinking ahead for tomorrow.
We've talked a lot about, the word gentleman as part of our mission statement. And I'm wondering if maybe, some of our alums and maybe some of our students could weigh in on, what that word means to us. I know I once heard a younger boy get asked, what does the word gentleman mean to you? And he said, somebody who holds doors open for other people, or somebody that wears a suit. And it's so much more than that. And I know that we as a community have talked about what that sort of modern definition of a gentleman is, and how that lives within our mission and values. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I could jump in. So I remember when I toured the school initially back in around 2005 with my parents, and one of the first things they said was, look at all these little gentlemen. And to them, that meant, students saying please and thank you, boys saying please and thank you in the, fifth grade. They didn't know a lot of fifth graders that, had manners. But when I eventually attended the school, I pretty quickly learned that the definition of a gentleman wasn't really like how you dressed or, how much old literature you read. It was really about, how you treated one another. It was about being a part of a community and participating in that community. It was about respect for the person sitting next to you and understanding that person and truly seeing them for who they are and celebrating that. And that's something that's kind of left an impression on me, as I've gone through Browning, gone to through university in my life, as an engineer. So just being able to see people for who they are. And that's what a gentleman is to me, a Browning gentleman.
And I guess I can go next because those sentiments really ring true for me as well. And in the spirit of, full transparency, and maybe this is the case for some of the people in our audience today, Browning was not the first choice school for my parents. They had fallen in love with the expansive and well-maintained campuses of the Westchester County schools. And I, however, had fallen in love with the small private school in the middle of Manhattan with the longest possible commute from my home in the Bronx. And when my parents asked me why Browning, you know what I mean? You could be so much closer. Um, the only answer really that I could offer was that it made me feel good when I was there. I liked the way it felt in the building. Um, and it took a bit of pleading, but the promise from the headmaster at the time, Dr. Clement, um, of becoming a Browning gentleman is actually what sold my mom on allowing me to go and travel to Manhattan at the tender age of seventh grade, right? Um, but I think now, what the word gentleman means has to go beyond what the Merriam-Webster's definition says, right? I think a gentleman, amongst other things, is someone that makes you feel safe, invited, and cared for, right? And it's this sense of comfort and security, and obviously the access of that inherently comes with attending a top-tier independent school in the middle of Manhattan, is really what sets Browning apart. And I think that's true now more than ever. I can't tell you how impressed I am anytime I get to interact with some of the students here. Um, and I'm very proud to say that I am to this very day still a Browning gentleman.
I really agree with what both of our Panther mentors said. I think it's important to look at the word gentleman more as treating everyone with respect and like uplifting everybody around you instead of, the classic chivalry. It's taking on a more modern meaning, like always looking at situations with an open mind and just treating everyone around you well.
I could also add on. So personally, for me, I think the word gentleman means treating people the way you want to be treated, standing up for each other even when it's hard, and also doing the right thing when no one's watching. That's a big thing for me. And basically just being as good as friend as possible to everyone in the community. And it's about representing your school and where you come from while being a role model for the younger students in the school. For me, I have a younger brother in the 4th grade, and I'm extremely close and proud that he looks up to me. And throughout the day, I think of setting a good example so that one day he will do the same.
Sorry, I agree with what a lot of people said. My dad also, when I was first applying to Browning in 7th grade, the first thing that stood out to him was like, oh, I want you to be a gentleman. I want you to come out of school as a gentleman. And I didn't really know what that meant. And he kept telling me that that's what he wanted me to become. And I feel like Browning has made me that. I think it's made me more compassionate. I think the tight-knit community, when I'm walking through the hallways, I know the name of almost every single person. I know I can say hi to everyone. As soon as I walk in the building, you just feel the warmth of the building, even if the heat isn't working in the winter. Like I know that I know that Browning is a place that makes you feel at home. And I think it's really become my second home now.
That's wonderful. Thank you all so much. And you've touched on so many things that are direct and concrete expressions of our school values. And so I think that's a great segue actually into talking a little bit more deeply about equitable practices and social impact and how that work lives at Browning. And that's something that we are really intentional about framing, with our core values. So, Mr. Samela, I'm wondering if you could sort of take us on a deep dive into our equitable practices and social impact work at Browning.
Yes, thank you, Ms. West. And so already, and I'm sure it's not the first time, but you've heard my colleagues here touch on and name some of our core values. We're talking about dignity, talking about curiosity and purpose. And really the way I see equitable practices is those things in action in the school. You actually heard our students here just illustrate those things in a real way. One thing I could highlight is this week started obviously with the recognition of Dr. Martin Luther King, right, on the Monday that we had off. But before we went away as a community, I reached out to different folks in the building and also some of the alumni, students, faculty members, staff members, and they all define dignity for themselves and in their lives at Browning. And so what we got was not, as Nate said, a Merriam-Webster definition of the word dignity, right? It's not just something for us to plaster on the wall, put on our website and say, yes, we believe in this. Of course, I don't know anyone who doesn't believe the dignity is a good thing, but people named exactly what it was for ourselves. And we heard things about the fact that you don't have to earn dignity, right? It's something that's afforded intrinsically to everyone because they're human. We heard about the ways that it lives, how we see each other. It touched on, right, and connects with this idea of curiosity. We're not here alone. We want to be curious about the people around us, the people out of sight, the people who have been here before us and who'll be here after us, right? And when we combine that idea of equitable practices, where we use our curiosity, we uphold others' dignity, then what do we do with that, right? We've built this strong community, again, behind the red doors in the middle of Manhattan. How do we change the world? How do we use that, use the strength that we see, the power of these boys to make the world a better place? And that's where the social impact lives, right? Boys finding and connecting with their purpose. What in the world do I recognize that could be better? And then what can I do about it? And so then it springs into action for us with connecting with communities outside of Browning, connecting with communities inside Browning, and even through a pandemic where we're challenged by not being able to always be together physically. We're challenged by Zoom fatigue, right? When there's virtual events even like this, and still, over 100 of you are showing up and excited to learn more and connect with these folks. And so we don't let anything stop us because, right, we believe in these core values, we live them. You'll hear them over and over and over. And I think that's a testament to the fact that for us, they're real in the way we live the school. And it's not just a slogan.
Thank you. Any of our students want to weigh in on this piece?
Yeah, I can talk about this a bit.
Go ahead. Thank you.
So I think these values relate to both our lives inside and outside of the school. At Browning specifically, community is extremely stressed, and being a good, honest person at this point as a student means to be as kind as possible to my friends, teachers, and faculty. And we are always taught to be curious, ask questions, never give up, and most importantly, always seek new opportunities and try new things. And ultimately, I think these will lead us into becoming successful leaders in the future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So as you all heard at the beginning of our discussion this evening, as our panelists were introducing themselves, we have two of our alumni with us who referred to themselves as Panther Mentors. And some folks in our audience may be familiar with what that group is, but I would love to spend some time talking about how the Panther Mentors were formed and how you all see your partnership with the school as being vital in helping Black and Brown boys experience a sense of belonging here, and ultimately lending itself to everybody feeling a sense of belonging.
I can go ahead and lead off on this one, Dillon, if you don't mind.
You got it.
So if anybody can remember as far back as the year 2020, you probably remember it being a pretty tumultuous time for us globally. But more specifically, during the summer of 2020, and following the passing of George Floyd, there were a series of accounts, and they were titled Black at X, Y, and Z Independent School. And the accounts were purposed with delineating egregious acts of bias, some overt racism, and overall explaining how much of a bad time certain people, more specifically people of color, were having at independent schools. In an effort to gain a better understanding of what it might be and what the experiences were, and Browning actually got ahead. And I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Browning actually never had a Black at account. Dragging our brothers through the mud publicly is not really something that we do. As a small or one of the smaller independent schools, we get beat up on by the other ones, right? So, so we do a pretty good job of taking care of ourselves. So Browning actually reached out to a bunch of the Black alumni, and we were able to round up about 25 gentlemen or so, ages ranging, well, not ages, let's talk class of graduation, 1972, and I think the youngest gentleman in the room was about 2019. So it's almost 50 years of Black history at Browning that was in the same room. And we shared some stories about our experiences at the school. And we were a bit surprised at how similar some of the experiences that occurred in the 70s and the 2010s were, right? And so if we had these experiences and we were alums, we wanted to make sure that these things weren't still continuing to happen at the school. And, you know, I can't tell you how much love was in that room. And so despite, you know, sharing a story that may have been, you know, traumatic or something that might not have been right, every story ended with a laugh and ended with but I love that guy, right? And there was so much joy in that room, and we ended up feeling really charged up and ready to make an impact. And I got to be honest with you, those emotions ultimately culminated in a list of asks, right, where we addressed some of the concerns that we might have had for the institution at the times that we were present. And with an incredible response, John Body and his team met and then surpassed everything we could have asked for. The amount of support that we received for the forming of this group called the Panther Mentors has been tremendous. We asked for things like representation of Black people at all levels of the institution. Since there, we've been joined by my friend and colleague now, Naledi Samela and Mr. Ronald Taylor. We asked for a review of the curriculum for racial insensitivity, mandated cultural and anti-racism trainings, and above all, to enforce all of the above by holding the members of the community accountable for acts that might be perceived as biased or hateful. It was almost an insult that we would have asked, right? And John and his team absolutely did an incredible job at meeting us more than halfway. In terms of what we plan to do to grow the community and have an impact there, you know, it can't be understated the power of seeing it, right? You got to see it to believe it. And so to have experiences, to rub shoulders, to share stories, to share experiences, and have conversations with gentlemen that sat in the same chairs and were taught in some cases by the same teachers, played against the same schools and sports and had the same rivalries. There's an unspoken connection that's there, and it's deep and it's profound, right? Something about your alma mater will always call you home. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Make sure that the environment there feels as much like home to the students that are there as possible, right? And we have a host of awesome events coming up. We like to meet with our students once every month or so, just to make sure that things are going well. And I think actually maybe I can hand it over to Dillon to talk about some of those things.
Thank you so much, Nate. It's going to be tough to follow that one up. But our partnership really grew out of the need to provide an environment for students to, you know, to be able to see someone that looks like them after they read those red doors, a word that's come up quite a bit when talking about, students at Browning are like brothers. We're all brothers, and we all feel that honestly, sincerely, that we are all, it's a one big family. And unfortunately, many of the Black and brown students at Browning don't necessarily have ready access to, say, a lawyer or a scientist like Nate, or an engineer like myself, just at the ready to talk to about anything, be it professional or not professional, and bonus points if they even share their same complexion. However, we have quite the Rolodex with the Panther Mentors of people from all different disciplines, to students to talk through for possible professional advice or possible help with school, or just something to talk about, because a lot of us come from the same neighborhoods, a lot of us have had the same experiences, and we've all walked through those same red doors and walked through those same halls. And working with Mr. Samela, and by extension the Browning community as a whole, we are able to give students, not just Black and brown students, but students throughout the entire community, just different exposure and a perspective on different walks of life. Community dignity and especially perseverance are, pretty big at Browning, and we want to be able to help maintain and reinforce that through speaking with students and keeping up with faculty as well.
Dillon, I agree with you. It's always a challenge to want to follow Nate when speaking, but I'll extend that to you as well. So now, with that being said, I'll jump in with the two of you, but I was holding on to this other one of our 4 core values, because I knew that we'd talk about the Panther Mentors and how they came to be, but that's honesty, right? And so at Browning, we engage honestly with our past as we think about our present and our future, and with the past as we study history, as we study the world, right? We want to be honest and critical in the way that we look at things. And we want to do so in a way that allows us and challenges us to be better, to be the best version of ourselves as individuals and as a school. One thing I really love about Browning, I love the size, I love the way that we're built on relationships, and it really is a place to be known, right? Whether you're a student there now, whether you're a faculty member, whether you're an alumnus, right? It is a place to be known based on who you actually are. And that is core to this idea of belonging, right? One of our core human needs. If you look through a lens of, say, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Belonging is right there as really essential to our own health as individuals, and again, as a community. And so I was just so impressed, and they mentioned, and me being new to the school, as I was going through the process of being hired for the school, I met with the Panther Mentors. I met with the entire faculty, right? Not just members of the administration, and with students and with some of the student groups on campus now. And so these folks knew me a little bit coming in before I even started. I knew a little bit about them, and we were asking each other real questions, because the goal is to come in here and do the challenging work, right? To struggle, just as I mentioned that our curriculum is designed to help our kids do, and then to come out stronger on the other side. And I will say, again, in the spirit of honesty, everything that I hoped that would be true as I was looking at coming into the community has been more than true, and surpassed all my expectations. And so, I hope I in some way am living up to what these folks, when they looked at me, were hoping to see. But I've enjoyed working with all the folks here on this panel. I've enjoyed talking to some of you. I was scrolling through and seeing some of the faces in the squares, and some of you have passed by my office, and we have a little chance to chat on the second floor as you return to school. But I hope that you are seeing our school for what it truly is, and you get to make some great decisions about what's next for your sons.
Thank you all so much for really bringing all of that to life. And I have to say, from where I sit, maybe selfishly, it's just been such a pleasure to work with this group, in admissions work, and to be, in regular communication with you all. So I'm so grateful, and it's just been so enjoyable and gratifying for everybody here to have the Panther Mentors. So thank you. Switching gears a little bit, but hitting on a really important theme, and it was sort of touched upon very briefly when Mr. Taylor mentioned the Modern Masculinities suite of courses. But masculinity is something that we talk a lot about at Browning, and it's something that we as a society are examining in terms of thinking about what healthy masculinity is. And we're committed here at Browning to offering our boys a broader definition of what it means to be a man. So I'd love to spend a little bit of time exploring that and what that means in the context of the Today's Boys, Tomorrow's Men theme.
I think I'll get us started there, Kelly, if that's all right. I think this is some of the most vital and most exciting work we're doing. As I said earlier, it matters deeply to us that we are a boys' school, right? And we want to do right by these boys. We have classes in this Modern Masculinities suite that exist right now in 5th, 6th, 7th, 10th, and 12th grades. Some of those are new this year. Some of them are in year 2 or 3. It's an iterative process for us, but across the board, what we are interested in is giving the boys the tools, to be emotionally fluent, right? To have a full range of emotions available to them, to be empathetic and caring, to be good leaders, good followers, good listeners, right? To ask great questions. And that's something we have to do across the board, right? It exists in all of our academic classes, and we realized we wanted to highlight some of that thinking in some other ways. So Ronald can speak about how that lives in some of those middle school classes. We have a healthy masculinity class that we've introduced this year in 10th grade, which is not didactic by any means. It is very much about helping boys explore the range of masculinities that are available to them, but also to get them to think critically about what the culture is handing them around masculinity, and then to make some decisions for themselves. And of course, we hope those decisions are in line with our values. We do care about those deeply. You're going to hear about them a lot more as we keep talking. And then in 12th grade, we have a Tomorrow's Men class that really tries to plant a flag, and this is what you've been doing, and this is what you've been thinking about, and now let's think about how you're going to go apply that, right, in the quote unquote co-ed world, right, as boys get ready to go off to college. Greg's in that class right now, and beyond, and just what is incumbent upon us to be, there is a piece of this that's gendered, right, to be good men, but also just to be good human beings, right? That's always at the core of what we're doing on this. Right, Ronald, I'll let you talk about how that's living in middle school. I'll just add as the last piece, I'm really proud that we have situated curiosity as a key piece of what it means to be one of tomorrow's men, right? The kind of men the world needs in the 21st century. And I think it's key. I think you'll see it in these boys today. And it's, I think, one of the pieces that can't be missed as we think about this aspect.
Thank you so much, Mr. Campbell, for walking through that so eloquently. In the middle school, I think the important thing to always lead with is that going back to that core value of dignity, that's really where we begin to dig deep into it in this suite of courses specifically. So 5 through 8, we have a sequence as well that's also in a similar iterative process. So in 5th and 7th grade this year, to integrate an additional layer to our courses, we partnered with the Listening Project under Dr. Niobe Way and Dr. Joseph Nelson. And the point of that class, as it sounds by the title, is to get students to listen, which I think sounds really basic, but teaching the 5th grade section, boy, did I learn a lot in the span of 15 weeks, getting that ready to go. In the 7th grade, I'm sure Brody, if he feels comfortable, can touch on that when we transition to the students, because that's the other section. But ultimately, kind of piggybacking off of what Mr. Campbell said, the goal is to get boys to develop the skills to be empathetic and actually genuinely curious about one another and the world around them. And so, typical history teacher, I love to go back to a source. So for example, in one of the interviews that one of our boys shared, he opened up about his father being a police officer. And this is a boy of color in our classroom. And like the way he painted in the interview that the boys did with their parents, the way the father painted what it was like to be a police officer as a man of color, during the political context that we've lived through in the past 3 years was more educational than I could have ever created in that space. But it spurred a conversation that was curious, where those boys built empathy in the 5th grade around what does it mean to have multiple layers of identity. So that's the power of the work that I want to just give us a quick snapshot of. In 6th grade, we have a course called Radical Empathy, which is where we believe that empathy is a radical action. And it takes really specific commitment to that. And so that class literally just started today with the 6th grade in the 2nd semester. And one of the first questions that I asked to get that class started was, what do you need to feel safe in this space? And the number one response from the boys was literally, I need to feel like I can just be myself and not be judged. And I think that's such a beautiful way to start a course on empathy, because that's the point of the course. But then also we're doing that in 6th grade, which I think is so healthy for the boys. And of course, the research supports that across multiple indicators. As I mentioned, 7th grade, we do the listening project, but a little bit more mature for the 7th graders, and we'll continue that work next year. And in 8th grade, we're working on a course that we affectionately call like life skills, but it's a similar bridge to what's happening in the 12th grade, thinking about what do our boys necessarily need to know as they move into that high school transition. But ultimately, the through line across all of those is, how do we not only affirm your own dignity as a young man, but also affirm the dignity of other people around you? I think it needs not to be said that COVID-19 has made our world an interesting place. And if we're able to identify how we uphold dignity of ourselves and others, what type of world can we create? Which is the way I always think about these courses. So I know I'm speaking way too much, but I got excited there. But that's the middle school perspective. And if it's okay, I would love to hear from Brody, who can speak to it a little bit more eloquently from his own experience. If that's okay, Ms. West, sorry, I kind of pivoted there.
Thank you. Yeah, so throughout all the classes for masculinity in middle school, we're really focusing on how to interact with others and like express emotion in a way that's really honest, tying to all of our school values, being curious, being honest, feeling free to say whatever we want. Well, not whatever we want, but like being able to express ourselves without being judged, and just like having an open environment, which I think is really important to shape tomorrow's men.
I can speak on the 12th grade class. So I think what's really unique about our class, this is the first time we've done a masculinity class, because I know it's pretty new to school. And I like that it's actually started a lot earlier now, because I think it brings up a lot of important points. But I think for our class, we're already pretty close. I think that's what's really good about Browning. We already are comfortable to a certain extent with each other. But I think this class really exposes like what preconceived notions we have, what we feel comfortable with sharing. And I think we've had these prompts of having to open up, and we've talked about vulnerability and what it is to be a man now. I mean, we're all going to college, we're going to be on our own. We're not going to really have people telling us what to do and how to act. And I think this class really guides us in that direction, because it makes us learn more about independence and what it's like to be a man in society right now, and how we can learn about that. And I don't think it just forms or puts us in a box. And we actually talked about like the box, what it means to be a man in this box, and how we can step outside of it, but also if we're not comfortable, how we can stay inside it and still help other people be outside that box. And I think this class has just made me more curious about what it means to be a man in society today.
Ms. West, I'd love to add one more thing. First of all, Greg, I'm really grateful to hear that, and I'm glad it's living well for you. The stakes are high on this work, right? And I've mentioned that we're research driven. We should share that a lot of this comes from really compelling research around. I mean, the CDC has labeled an epidemic of adult male loneliness, that men are not often taught the interpersonal skills to maintain relationships when they rupture, to be emotionally available and fluent, as Greg and Brody are both talking about. And that's behind a lot of this, right? I mean, this is health and wellness work on a really deep level that we're hoping is going to sustain these boys for years to come. I'll share a quick anecdote. I am the parent of a Browning boy, and he's in kindergarten, and he shared with me one night that he went in and he got to, they did a feeling share that day. And he got to share that he was anxious because he was scared that he was going for the vaccine that day, right? And just the fact that the kindergartners were making space to share feelings in a healthy way. And his buddies got up and were like, you're going to be okay, right? You know, a group of 5-year-olds reassuring one another. It's everything that I am proud to be associated with at this place. So, you know, we're aware of those stakes, but that is the impetus behind this work. And I'm glad to hear from Greg and Brody that it's living in the way we are hoping.
Somebody cutting onions in here, man.
I'll just jump in there too. I love the way I see it play out at the school. You know, when I think about a boys' school, right, teaching masculinities, it's about not reducing boys and men to what we may have been taught that we have to be, right? But it's also about us and our boys exploring, not reducing other people to what we may have been told that they're supposed to be, people of different genders, right? And so it's not, we talked about being a gentleman before and being a Browning gentleman. It's not about letting go of the good manners, right? Of the way of treating other people with respect and politeness and kindness. But it's about knowing that everybody's capable of those things in our full humanness and not paring us down to some sort of attributes that we may have associated with boys. And so I see, I also coach basketball for the JV, mostly 9th graders. And, you know, I get to see them not have to be so stoic, right? They experience the full range of emotions. And if you walk around the school and you see all the mood meters on all the classrooms and in the hallways, right, you see that playing out. And boys like to share what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, right? And how different things are playing out for them. You see it in the classroom, you see it on the middle school floors with the middle schools, and they started their own clubs and they're playing right there in the school. They're going out to Central Park and you see them doing the things that they enjoy. And some of those things might be surprising. Some of our interests might be surprising, but we get to bring our full selves into that building. And if things spark some curiosity in someone else, then we engage in conversation about that. And we're just really open to that. Of all the places I've worked and been around, I think I've brought my full self into the space and seen other people do the same more than anywhere else.
That's fantastic. Thank you all so much. We do have a question in the chat, and while we don't have a specific, lower school representative here with us this evening, I'm hoping that a few of you might be able to weigh in on how some of the values that we've talked about tonight live in the lower school. Mr. Campbell just shared a really wonderful example, sort of from the parent perspective, but would love to hear anything that anybody else has to offer in terms of what this looks like in lower school.
I can share that we're in process right now on naming the competencies around this modern masculinities work and a lot of our character development work. What those of us in education call SEL, social emotional learning, right? That is part of the process this year. We are very explicitly naming and targeting those specifically for lower school as well, so that we are preparing them to be ready for this work that gets a little heavier in 5th grade, as Ronald mentioned, and then sort of dives into the deep end up in upper school. So I know there are assemblies around our core values in lower school. I know they are presenting those constantly. They are reaffirmed by the teachers on a daily basis, right? Especially as so many of them are central to how we treat one another, right? That Greg can talk about his class in the way he does. It's not uncommon for the Browning boy, when you ask him who his best friend is, to not be able to answer the question because they feel that cohesive bond across the grade. But that's explicitly worked on with the younger boys. And Eric Ogden is leading really great work on that in lower school right now. And I'll let the boys talk about their experience, but it's another place where we're maintaining our intentionality and getting even deeper into that work.
Yeah, if I just may add quickly, and I would love to hear from some of our boys. I know Adam and Brody experienced the lower school here at Browning. But in terms of the assemblies, Mr. Ogden is really intentional about sharing literature with the boys in our assemblies and really naming how our core values are showing up in these different books and in these different characters. And it really is incredible to see a group of young boys on Zoom, talking about how a specific character is demonstrating integrity. It really, really is powerful. So, this work, as we've pointed out a handful of times tonight, is so deeply rooted in these core values, and it's a great way to make it concrete for our younger boys. And literature is certainly a way, and as I'm sure all of the parents of young boys with us know all too well. But just wanted to sort of take that a step further. But I would love to hear. I don't know if Adam or Brody, not to put you on the spot, but if you have anything that you'd like to share that you remember from your lower school years.
So one thing I definitely remember was the 4th grade buddies, where every new kindergartner would get like a 4th grade buddy. And I think it was like every Friday, they just have a period where they were able to like interact, maybe like read a book, just be curious with them and see what's in store for their future.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, right now, as you know, my brother is in 4th grade, so he is currently a 4th grade buddy to one of the younger boys. And I think the lower school just is like the foundation to teach the younger students the 4 core values in subtle ways to prepare them for middle and upper school. And in the 10 years I've been at Browning, I felt that I can be a lot of different things here at once that might be harder somewhere else. And there just aren't stereotypes here, male or otherwise. And I think that's part of both being a small school and an all boys school.
Thank you for that, Adam. Yeah, I'll throw out one other example that comes to my mind. And that would be the relationship that our 4th grade boys have in a typical year with the Manhattan Children's Center, which is a school for children who have autism. And this relationship is something that's tied into their curriculum. The 4th grade boys learn all about otherness and dignity, again, one of our values, through some of the books that they read in the beginning of the year. And they really explore the idea of multiple intelligences and, again, treating everybody with dignity. And they visit with their buddies at MCC every other week. And this is a really powerful, very hands-on experience for our boys to really have an opportunity to reach out and form a relationship with someone that, at first glance, maybe they don't feel that they have a whole lot in common with. So that's another really nice concrete example. All right. Well, I'd love to jump into the idea of purpose and social impact. And we also have a question in the chat about community outreach and some of the things that we do here at Browning. And I know, obviously in the pandemic, we've had to put some of these things on pause. But I also know that we're certainly eager to return to some of these activities and probably have ideas for new partnerships with organizations and things along those lines. So, our mission calls for us to help talented boys really develop a sense of purpose. And I'd love to hear a little bit from you all about what that really looks like.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there on behalf of the middle school side of things. And the way I think about the ways that we introduce the idea of identifying purpose, I like to use the word mosaic when I'm thinking about this, because I think it's multiple things that blend together, especially in the middle school experience, that help push the boys to start thinking about purpose. So Brody eloquently spoke about his experiences across the different courses that we offer for modern masculinities, which help boys to identify what does it mean to show up as a man or to show up in different spaces and have empathy and to engage. The other piece that I think is really important is due to the nature of our size, what we're allowed to do, which is really important, is have that nature of relationship. I get the fun job of wearing the good cop, bad cop hat sometimes with students. And 99% of my conversations focus in on, with the boys, if you made a poor decision, this is not about the school being ashamed of you. You will never hear any adult in this building say, I'm ashamed or angry. You might hear the word disappointed, and that's because we know that your purpose is greater than the poor decision that you made. And I think that that constant messaging is so important, not only from a neurological and social and emotional standpoint, but also from a character development standpoint. And I think that work is central to the work that we do. This week alone, I've seen the ways in which teachers have extended themselves in ways that I know does not exist in other institutions, simply because they are so committed to making sure that boys can identify their purpose. Whether it's, I'm going to meet with you at 7:30 in the morning, although I'm going to be at school until 6 o'clock that night for extra support or help. Whether it's, giving up a period to host an impromptu math support session. I think that's the ways in which we showcase identifying purpose and edifying that purpose in our boys, that I think, a website can say one thing, but you have to see it to believe it, is oftentimes how I think about it. So that's why I think isn't so integral to the middle school. So I'll share that. I'm sure other folks have other things they would like to add as well.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Let me let Greg go first.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak on my experience of being curious at Browning. I think one of those aspects is we don't really because we're so small, there isn't a huge array of classes that we can choose from. But I think Browning makes the best of that situation. For example, I took a class this year that I don't think any other school, or I've never heard any other school offering before. It's called Literature of Friendship, where we read books about friendship, discuss friendship, and we have framing questions about what it means to be friends. What is the value of losing friends? How do you keep relationships? And I think that has really formed a lot of my thinking about friendship. And I think it's classes like those that make me more curious and really let me learn more about the world.
Yeah. So one thing I was going to mention is that, and Ms. West is absolutely right, that there have been things that have been challenged by the pandemic and our inability to gather in large groups. We unfortunately had a big service day planned with the Mott Haven Fridge Network. They got postponed due to a combination of weather and not being able to have an outdoor space or an indoor space big enough for us to gather and provide meals for folks who are desperately in need, challenged by the pandemic. Another thing that I've seen, though, is the ingenuity of different ways that boys can contribute to the world. And so a couple of the things that I've loved seeing, and they've been based on relationships, but they've been based on things that kids are actually learning in the classroom. Our fourth grade is about to write Valentine's Day cards for different kids who are currently being seen at Memorial Sloan Kettering, the cancer hospital. And just developing relationships with those students, being curious, right? But also upholding the dignity of all those people who are receiving treatment and in a situation that's unenviable in some ways, but also just the learning that's happened. It's a reciprocal relationship. That it is about getting to know other folks, doing for other folks what we can, and also what we get from that. And so there's a big mental health and wellness piece to what it means when you can do for others. Another thing that happened today actually is a 7th grade student came into my office and let me know that, and he's a member of our middle school student council, let me know that in science class, he was learning about water scarcity and access to clean water around the world. So he wanted to propose to the middle school council, student council, what can we do about that? How can we raise awareness and potentially do some good to create more access to clean water around the world. And so he and I got on the internet together and started doing some research about different nonprofit organizations. We had a great conversation about microfinancing. We looked at different folks who are taking on that topic right now. And so what I love about the social impact ethos at Browning is students identifying a need in the world, something again that isn't what it could be, and then what can I actually do about it? And in that, they find their purpose, whether they're finding it in the classroom, whether they're finding it from relationships, whether we're offering ideas. But my very favorite and most of the social impact things that have happened this year and continue to happen have been completely student driven and folks coming to me or going to their teachers. Right before we went off to break, there were how many different drives going on in the lobby of our building, right? Just all these boxes, things for our furry friends, used clothing drives, canned goods. So all the different things that we can contribute outside of ourselves were being done, and that was all student driven.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So I'm keeping an eye on the clock because I do want to be respectful of everybody's time this evening. Before we wrap things up, I'm just going to ask for sort of a quick lightning round for each of you to share your favorite sort of either memory or thing about Browning.
I think what sticks out to me is like the closeness with everyone in my class, being able to connect to everyone who surrounds me, and building some of like the closest friendships I have.
For me, so there's a trip that the 10th graders go on. It's like a bonding trip. It's called Frost Valley. And there's on the last night, everybody gathers in a group with the peer leaders and everybody discusses, like, just opens up, talks about what their favorite moment from the trip was. And I don't think I've ever been so close with a group of friends in my life. And I think that's probably my favorite moment. When I look back on that, just brings me a lot of warmth.
I'll jump in. It's been a bit of for me since I've been back in the building, but being able to just walk through the halls and know almost everyone's name. I mean, coming from such a small, close-knit community, that's something special that you don't really get anywhere. And, you know, when I tell my friends and say college or even at my job right now, say, hey, yeah, I knew every single person in my class, and I knew every single person in the class below them and below them and below them, and we were all great friends. They don't believe me. And being able to share so many different experiences with folks that are younger, older, is just so special. And there's nothing else like that.
I think I can jump in next. Sorry, guys. Gene, your Wi-Fi woes seem to be contagious. But when I think of it, I think my favorite thing about the school, along with obviously its intimacy, has to be the people. And when I say the people, I don't just mean the students that you get to rub elbows with. Obviously, you know, they're all incredible, and we had really close classmates. But the faculty really takes a vested interest in the success and growth of each and every student in the student body. Browning is not the kind of place that you can hide, but it is the kind of place that you don't need to hide, right? You're always encouraged to be yourself and to see your commitments as an extension of you and your legacy. And Browning is the kind of place that allows you to do that.
Having only been at Browning for 7 months, I'll pick a very specific moment. So on the Friday before Halloween, many of us were dressed up. I think I was one of maybe 12 Spider-Men in the building. And I sat in on a middle school music class, and a couple of students next to me were arguing whether or not I was the real Spider-Man. So that was just one of my favorite moments.
I would say, just going back a little bit, I would say my favorite memory is probably 5th grade basketball, because that was my first experience on an actual team, and growing and playing with my friends was like a crazy and fun experience for me. And my coach at the time, who was also my teacher, I still know him now, and he's a big supporter and a friend of mine.
Ronald, I think it's me and you. You want to take it?
Sure, I can jump in. My favorite memory was teaching my 5th grade class, just because I've been teaching now for about 12 years, but being in a classroom where boys are just so curious to know each other and know each other well, for me reminds me why I decided to commit my life to education. And I think that's a good thing to always remember and hold dear. The 5th grade is a gem. Love them. And I'll share that. And then you got it, Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I was thinking that my favorite part of every day is the greeting at the front door. So just in a really general sense, there's 5 or 6 of us that are at the front door every day these days. And I really love getting to see the amount of love that happens as boys get dropped off. And as a boys' school, I'm really proud that as we do talk about love a lot, we love our students. But it's really clear how much the families love their boys too, right? And it's such a great way to start. As a very specific one, though, I'm going to embarrass Greg a little bit here. Greg, I apologize. I teach a class right now, as I mentioned earlier. I co-teach it with our head of school, John Body. Greg was in that class last year when it was just me. He didn't get the full experience, but we call it the Advanced Seminar in the Western Canon, and we read the great works of really Western Europe primarily. But we also have this great conversation on the side about the limitations of that understanding of a canon, and what it means to restrict it by time and place and nationality and gender and things like that. At the end of the year, we're very clear our project is about expanding our understanding of the canon, right? Not defending the barriers of it, but really opening up and engaging in what's often known as the great conversation. And Greg gave a really incredible presentation last year on Sor Juana Inez de la Cruz, a Mexican nun from the, Greg, please correct me, the 16th century. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So Greg made a really compelling case for not only why we should read it, but also how it should be paired with Hamlet. And so we actually did that this year. We changed the curriculum to fit a student's understanding of how that should work. And luckily enough, so my favorite memory is the day we did that, and Greg happened to be free, and he came in, and off the top of his head, I had last year's slides because I was going to show boys what Greg thought of it, but off the top of his head, he just immediately launched into last year's presentation. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot for that, Greg, but it was such an incredible example of a student who had engaged in the process of inquiry, but had the choice to decide where he wanted to put his energy, and it was still living with him a year later, and it fundamentally changed future students' experience of that class and that material, right? And that speaks to our size, our relationships, everything everybody else has mentioned. But it changed my understanding of a text I've read for 20 years and taught constantly. And to be able to pair that, thanks to Greg's insight and his willingness to stay engaged in that conversation, I think that's everything we want to be.
Thank you so much. Well, I think that's a great place to end. I am sorry, I do see that there are some questions in the chat that went unanswered. So I will get back to folks, on those, because I do want to make sure that the things on your mind are addressed. But again, just being respectful of everybody's time. I know it's a few minutes after 8, and we've probably all spent some time on Zoom already today. But I can't thank our panelists enough. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourselves and what Browning means or has meant to you, and really helping our audience gain a strong understanding of the notion of today's boys, tomorrow's men, and how we look at preparing our boys to go out into the world and really make a difference. So thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to our audience for spending part of your evening with us. We are truly grateful for your time and your consideration. So thank you, and have a wonderful rest of the evening, everybody.